And at least once a week, I still call Jordan and ask him if he'll come work for us here in South Dakota and bring him home, because he's still out there in D.C., but it'd be great to have him. Thank you, Benj. It's always so humbling to come and have Benj introduce you. I need to take him on the road with me, but there's no introduction quite like one that you would get from Benj Stoik. Listen, I know you've been here a long time, and I think Larry gave you a pretty good rundown of a lot of things that we've done in the state of South Dakota, that how our legislative session went, challenges that we may have ahead, and then you got to hear from a couple of your legislative leaders as well. I'm just going to take your questions and let you talk about what you want to talk about, but I want to remind you of one thing, and that is that in South Dakota, what we have done in the last several years is just what we as conservatives have always said we believed. We just did it. And we've proven that it works, that it creates an environment where our economy can thrive, where people are better off, they're happier, the families are stronger, and it really is a testimony to the people who live here about how special our way of life is. I know that for all of us, we get mired down in the politics and the policy and debate and discussion, and we forget that we woke up in the greatest state in this country, and that we should be optimistic and happy. That this country is the strongest country in the world, and it stands for something. It stands for freedom. And here in South Dakota, we have embraced and fought to defend those freedoms like we probably haven't seen in this country for a very, very long time. So I hope you know that we have many, many things going for us. We have the strongest economy in the nation right now. Our kids are leading the nation in educational outcomes because they were in their classrooms learning. We have less than 2,000 people in the whole state of South Dakota that are on unemployment. We are the only state in the country that didn't take the elevated unemployment benefits from the government when that was offered, because I told the president, thank you for the flexibility, but we don't need them. Our people want to work. We had our suicides and drug overdoses drop during the pandemic, which was the only state in the country that saw those decreased. And South Dakota's overdoses during the pandemic went down by 16%. So while our people were working, their businesses were growing, our kids were doing better, and also our families were happier. And I think that's a wonderful thing to reflect on and to remember about what is special about South Dakota. One thing, I don't know if Larry covered it, but for years and years, when people have got on the internet and searched where they wanted to go visit or where they wanted to go live, the number one search that they put in would be warm climates, tropical destinations, beaches. That's what people were always looking for. That has dramatically changed the last 2 years in this country. Now, the number one search that people have for where they want to go on vacation or where they want to go live and move their family is small towns and rural America. And that's because of you guys. That's because people got a glimpse at how fantastic South Dakota is. Our states where families still get to walk up and down main streets like Mobridge and know everybody and spend time together and really have a quality of life that the rest of the world is hungry for. So I'm so grateful that you've trusted Larry and I to lead you the last several years, and I hope that you understand the real gift that we have being in this state, because it's pretty special. But with that, let's see if you guys have comments or questions or anything that you want to cover that Larry didn't already give you the answer to. You gave him everything?
Yeah, everything. Senior government class.
Oh, you guys got questions? Are you going to quiz me on the Constitution? No? Federalist 4950, which one do you want to talk about? No? I won't pressure you. What do you guys have? All right, you are wore out. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, I'm really concerned. How can we keep our state this way? There's just such a creeping sense, and people are so easily convinced that wrong is right and right is foolish. How we want to keep South Dakota the way it is.
Well, I'm going to tell you, don't listen to the news. And people are so lazy, they don't do their own homework anymore. And you guys got to start reading the facts. And it is so rare for me, and I'm sorry, Austin, love you, But you guys got to tell the truth a lot more often. You know, people today, we live in an instant gratification society where people read a headline and they assume they know the story. There are so many times, even in the Argus Leader, where the headline says something, and then at the end of the article, they'll completely give a data point or something to keep some integrity in their story that's the exact opposite of what that headline said. Because they know people only read the headlines. And headlines sell papers. And that's why they do that. You're being manipulated, and we're being manipulated because we're too lazy to do our own homework on something. So if you guys, you know, are sitting here wondering, well, I wonder what really is going on with the state budget. Did she have the authority to spend those federal dollars or not? Well, do your research. Did the exact same thing every other governor's ever done. I'd already had approval from the legislature to spend those dollars and to take care of federal grants. That's why we did it exactly how we've always done it in South Dakota. I wonder what really is going on with impeachment. Well, read the facts. Don't read a headline and don't read a quote in a paper. Go do your research and find out. That's the kind of stuff I need you guys to do, because it matters now more than ever. And what I'm finding is there are very few policymakers that really read their bills anymore before they go and vote on them. And it's starting to happen here in South Dakota. And that's the one thing I've always been so proud of South Dakota, was that we did our work right. And I could always go in DC when I was a congresswoman and say, listen, in South Dakota, we still know how to legislate. People understand, they're experts on their bill. They read them before they vote on them. Every bill gets a hearing. I always bragged about it. I can't do that anymore. This was the first year that we had a bill that never got a hearing because they didn't want to talk about it. So it never even gave it a chance to be debated. It's the first time that I saw legislators on the last couple of days of session vote on bills they had no idea what was in them. They just wanted to go home because they were tired. So listen, that's the research you have to do, because I want to keep the integrity in our government, and I think it's important that we do. So just do your research. I'm not going to tell you, my side of the story, anybody else's story, but you gotta know. You gotta know what's going on with the state so that we can keep it special like it is. Yep.
Governor, we appreciate the direction you're taking us in the state. And we love you and you're in our prayers. And I have a question on critical race theory. What is being done with that in the state of South Dakota?
On critical race theory?
Yes.
Oh, you're gonna love tomorrow. We did, I brought 2 bills this legislative session that banned critical race theory from being taught in our classrooms in our K-12 schools, and another one that banned it in our universities. The legislature supported and passed, and I signed into law, the university one. So now in South Dakota, going forward, critical race theory and cannot be taught in our universities. They killed the K-12 one. So tomorrow I will be signing an executive order to make sure that critical race theory is not taught to our kids in our public school systems too. And critical race theory, because I got into a discussion with the tribal council members and the president of the Pine Ridge tribe, because they came to the residents and we were talking about a lot of things, because they're the tribe that banned me for a period of time, and I never really understood why. I think it was over the pipeline, but they came and we talked for a couple of hours and visited a while ago, but they said, well, we also have a problem that you like this critical race theory. I go, I hate critical race theory. You're kidding me. They go, no, you like it. I go, no. Critical race theory is racism, and it is teaching that one person is better than another person based on their sex, their color, or their gender, their race. And I said, there's no place in that. I think our kids need to be taught a true history, and that should not be in our classrooms. And they said, well, that's what we think too. I said, well, there you go. That's the problem with when people don't talk to each other, and when you don't have conversations, and people you don't realize you probably agree on 80 to 90% of the stuff. And knowing what critical race theory is, and that it has its background in Marxist teaching, should tell us that we don't want it in our public schools. Yes, sir.
Thanks for everything you do. I got a couple things Lower County, which is in a lot of counties. What do you think can be done to try to help out there?
Well, we're looking at that. The legislature did decide to do a summer study. I don't know if you guys talked about this yet, but we have about $800 million in prisons that need to be built in the state of South Dakota. It's a lot of money. But frankly, we are just a year or two away from really being in a situation where we won't be able to house people safely anymore. And you guys have challenges at the local level too. So this summer study the legislature will be looking at if there's ways we can partner. Everybody should be aware that local county jails have different regulations that have to be followed than state penitentiaries and state facilities. State penitentiary and facilities have different regulations than federal prisoners have. So even federal prisoners have to be fed at different times, be in different rooms, be handled differently than state ones need to be, than local ones need to be. So the reality of putting all three types of those types of prisoners in one building together and being able to run it efficiently might be a challenge, and that's really what we have to figure out. But we're looking to see if addressing the needs that you guys have, but if regional facilities would work in a way that we could share the costs with the state and get it done that much quicker. Because I think you guys had a bill for that, right, during the session, Charlie?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons some of those bills didn't get signed this year, didn't get to me, was because they know that we're going to be working on it and coming up with it in the future. We did put 14% of our state budget into reserves. Typically, we only put 10% in. We did 14 this year, which was what I asked the legislature to support, recognizing that we've got all these costs coming, with having to build prison facilities, so that we'll have some ability to partner with you to address those needs. Yes.
Just a couple comments, Governor. Wish I'd have wrote down, for those that know me, know that I talk to a lot of people, and talk to a lot of people that are out of the state. And I wish I'd have wrote down how many people said they wish you were their governor.
Oh.
It would have been quite a list, so.
Well, I just hope you want me to be your governor. I hope you guys want me to be your governor. I want to stay.
Right. And the other thing is when I vote for you again for governor, I want you to remember that I want you to work hard for me every day to keep the federal government out of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the biggest thing that bothers me of everything going on, because I have family, grandkids, and I'm more scared of the federal government today than I have ever been.
Yeah.
And I hope that you continue. Benj told us how hard you work, and I believe that.
Yeah.
But I hope that's the number one thing going forward, is keep them out of here.
It's
We're smart enough in these communities to take care of ourselves.
It's amazing to me how dramatically my life changed from when Trump was in the White House to when Biden was in the White House. When Trump was in the White House, like him or not, everybody, he got up every day and tried to help us do big things here in South Dakota. He just did. He could say, he'd call and say, Kristi, what do you need? And I'd say, well, we started with the fireworks, or else I would say, well, I need this program fixed, and I want these duck licenses changed, and I want this. And he was helping us with all this stuff, and I could be proactive and be out there helping people solve the problems and challenges that they have with the federal government. When Biden got into the White House, we immediately went on defense. It is like war just trying to protect our way of life. I'm suing the federal government over so many issues right now, just the litigation to keep the Constitution specifically granted limited powers to the federal government, and the vast majority of them are given to the people and to the state governments to make those decisions that are best for their people. The best thing that President Trump ever did was that as governor, he let me do my job. If Biden had been in the White House during COVID, he would have absolutely forced us out here with military and police to close every single business and lock doors on schools. It would have been unbelievable. Thank God we had President Trump in the White House when COVID was going on, because he allowed me to do my job as governor. When I ran for governor, you guys probably remember there was 4 things that I said that I was going to do, but one of them was to fight the federal government. And unfortunately, I spend not a majority of my time, but I bet 50% of my time fighting regulations they send to us, things that they tell us that we have to do. You know, the Keystone Pipeline they shut down right away. They went forward and have been imposing mandates on our social programs that we don't want to follow, imposing health code items through our health department that we don't do, mandates. So it is a big part of our life now is fighting the federal government. Yes.
What's the good news on the pipeline?
Well, I don't know. Have you guys, I mean, I filled my truck yesterday, $150. You know, I made a statement on the news that it was costing a farmer who's out there preparing his fields and digging another $5,000 a week to fill his tractor than it did a year ago. And do you know what? Every national reporter went out there and tried to fact check me and prove that I was lying. If they spend 10% of the time trying to help tell the story of what Biden's done by driving those prices up as they did trying to fact check me, boy, we wouldn't be in this situation. So we don't have any progress on getting the pipeline back online. We were very close. I was very disappointed the company pulled all their efforts out, because we were very close at the time to getting Canada to sue the United States over it, because they had invested a lot of time and money into getting that infrastructure in place. So we will keep it there, keep talking about it. What Biden has done by shutting that down, by green lighting Nord Stream 2, by encouraging opening up our reserves to use for our fuel supply, and then doing business with Venezuela. I mean, dear Lord, could you ever project a weaker America to the world? It's unbelievable. And I tell people all the time, I have no doubt that if Russia wanted to come after the United States, we could fight them off. I just don't know if we have the chance. If China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran all blow up at the same time, can we do that? I don't know. But that's really the situation that President Biden is creating right now. Yes, sir.
Thanks for setting the guard down to do the border control there and everything else. Are we getting any of those border illegals up here in the state?
Not that we know of. We monitor them and we work with our nonprofits. How they're doing that is they're bringing them across the border, and Border Patrol is immediately turning them over to nonprofits. So, and a lot of them are ministries like Catholic ministries, Lutheran social services, all of that, and then they put them on planes or buses and relocate them everywhere in the country. So my way to monitor that, because this federal government is not telling us who's coming across the border, and they're not vetting these people, is to stay in constant communication with our nonprofits that would facilitate that. So not that we're aware of, and we've had to be very direct. There's a lot of these nonprofits that get state grants and federal grants, and I've just said, listen, you won't have a contract with the state of South Dakota if you're bringing illegals into this country. You just won't. Yes.
I would have a question about the concessionaires on state parks.
Yes.
How we could better communicate with the upper levels to where we could talk about concerns that concessionaires have on the river.
Oh, absolutely.
To where we could maybe change our dialect on things that need to be done in the state parks as concessionaires.
Okay, so I'm on it now. I'm going to connect with the secretary and make sure that he is chatting with you about that. Now, concessionaires sign long-term contracts to receive and to do service, provide service to the public in our state parks. So Rachel's talking to you right now. She's my chief of policy. She's going to connect you and make sure you get the answers that you need. And then I'm going to have them, Rachel, make sure that I know what the issue is so I can stay on top of it too.
Okay.
That'd be great. Thank you. I mean, poor game fishing parks. I mean, they just think I'm so up in their business. I mean, they've never had a governor that just, I mean, it is literally everything. Because this is our resources and our habitat and our wildlife and what we have here is so special. But people also need to be able to access it and have a good time and enjoy it. And they just happen to have a governor that's very passionate about hunting and the outdoors and also service to the public. So let me stay on top of it. Kevin's just like, oh dear Lord, she's gonna text me again. Yes.
Another thing, about 3 years ago, we lost our lake, forgetting what it was called.
Mm-hmm.
East Selby.
Yeah, I remember.
But what a lot of people don't realize is the amount of acres from farm ground to pasture that it's like,
Gone.
people can't use. And I just think there needs to be something done, whether it's with state help or it's a state park. I mean, I just think that something needs to be done about it. I mean, to hold this water back from flooding all this pasture and farm ground.
Yeah, that was life-changing when that dam blew because of the flooding that we have. And so it's been a big topic of debate. I can talk with you afterwards, too, about the plan for that, because it was debated for the last couple of years on what to do and repairs, and if there was agreement even, in the local communities on how to approach it. But yeah, it flooded a lot of land right away, and then now limits access to other land, too. People that were able to utilize that area just can't. And it was a recreation area that everybody in this whole region enjoyed. It was beautiful. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you for serving us, sir.
Thank you. I'm not sure if you're aware, the rest of the people, the VA has come out with changing services again in Sioux Falls and Black Hills area. Black Hills area, of course, is the one that mainly affects us.
Yeah.
What can you as a governor do to change those? Because the recommendations are out there, but sure like to find out what their basis was for making those recommendations. I can go through the list.
No, I'm very familiar with it. They listen. They are ignoring the veterans that are out here and the care that they need to do what they want to do, and that's shut down VA services in the state of South Dakota. We are fighting the federal government not just on Keystone, but also they're cutting our forest contracts. They're hitting our BLM land with new regulations. The EPA's coming back with their Waters of the U.S. regulation again. I don't know if you guys remember talking about that a few years ago, where they're trying to get jurisdiction on your land. Now they're coming after our veterans. So essentially what they're going to do is shut down hot springs and just have a clinic there. What they're doing in Sioux Falls, they just put millions of dollars into a new surgery center at the Sioux Falls VA and an emergency room there, remodeled it all. It's only been back up and going less than a year, and now they're shutting it all down and going to just turn it into a clinic. They're literally going to make it so our veterans have to drive 150 miles to get basic health care, and they're not even using the data of how many veterans are served by each of these facilities. In fact, the secretary was out here the first year I was governor because I'd been working on this issue. So in 2019, he came out here and promised that he saw how many veterans needed care, that he would keep hot springs open, he would return services to it, that we would do a better job. This is a complete reversal of what they had said that they would do. So we're going to war, for you guys on this issue in the debate and pushback. The problem is, who has a lot of authority in this area is your congressional delegation. You got a couple of U.S. senators that are the ones who sit on these committees that can shut a lot of policy down until they get in line on making sure they're restoring services to our veterans. So I would contact Senator Thune and Senator Rounds, because they can literally go and protest on the Senate floor and stop any bill over an issue such as this. And that's what I'd encourage them to do. It matters that much.
Yeah, what's unusual, I received the information having to do with the change in services, and a day or two later I received another fancy brochure from the VA talking about harassment.
Are you the veteran service officer up here?
Pardon?
Are you the veteran service officer? No? You just have a lot of...
We're just changing.
Yeah.
A new one being in training.
Okay.
But what my concern is, I guess the statement is who is harassing whom.
Yeah.
Because this brochure has to do with, report all harassments and everything else, whether it's an employee or whether it's someone from even a client or something that's there. Report all of that. And yet at the same time, Wilkie, when he was VA, he's the one that actually signed a document that Black Hills is going to remain open.
Yeah, he signed that day we were there.
And I heard you mention several times about having to sue people.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, I don't know how many people are aware of it, but the U.S. Navy SEALs filed a class action suit against the President and Secretary of Defense having to do with mandatory shots against religion. And a federal judge has, in fact, filed an injunction that cannot be, you cannot dismiss anybody from the service who put in for religious reasons. And the Navy, I know, has already issued an interim guidance having to do with this lawsuit. So it's, I don't know what the other services are doing, but there is an OPNAV instruction out already that you cannot dismiss people having to do with religion. So it's a kind of a plus.
So what they've been doing is there are exemptions in federal statute that said they have to recognize religious exemptions, medical exemptions, things like that. What they haven't done is put out guidance on that. So the rules on how they determine if this is a valid religious exemption or not. So because they haven't done that, they're kicking our military out of the service if they won't get the vaccine. Meanwhile, they haven't released any of the rules that the leaders in the military can use to determine if this was a valid religious exemption or not. So they're using this as a way to persecute our military. And by not releasing rules and guidance that people can follow, therefore there's no option except to kick them out if they don't follow orders.
Just one other item go along with that. You wonder how many man hours are lost because from the Navy side, every exemption request had to go to the Chief of Naval Operations.
Yeah, that's right.
So when you think about all the man hours that organization is putting into something that should never have processed.
That's
far
right.
along.
And listen, I think, outside of the military, if people want to get vaccinated, absolutely. That's a wonderful thing to do. If you don't want to get vaccinated, you shouldn't have to get vaccinated. It should be your choice. That's what this country is about. It's amazing to me. My brother went in the other day and was getting a lot of pressure to get the vaccine from his doctor. And he said, I don't have a problem with the vaccine at all. What I have a problem with is how hard you're pushing it. Yeah. Why are you pushing? He said, he said, how many times have you been vaccinated? And the doctor said, well, 4 times. And he said, well, listen, if I got vaccinated 4 times for the chicken pox and I still got the chicken pox, I'd be asking some questions. And he said, yeah, that's probably right. So because people have questions, doesn't mean that they should have to fall in line or get punished by the federal government. Yes, sir.
What I want to bring up kind of depends on where you get your news from.
Okay. Well, I want to let me add a qualifier here. Everything you read on the internet isn't true. I had to tell my mom that this weekend, so.
News isn't true.
Yeah.
Last Rasmussen poll I saw said 82% had concerns about election integrity. 62% fairly serious concerns. This almost depends on where you're getting your news from, because in a lot of circles, problems with election integrity are just like stupid problems. The people that are more on the internet are kind of thinking, if you don't think there's election integrity problems, you're the one that's stupid. I also read a book by a CIA contractor talking about potential civil war in the United States. And this person said it's something we should take seriously. They study civil wars all over the world. This gal's saying, as a CIA officer, I can't look at the United States, but as a contractor, I can. And they're saying we shouldn't take this lightly. And of course, because the vast majority of the bureaucracy is liberal, including the FBI and the CIA, she comes at this totally from a liberal perspective, saying people like me are going to cause the Civil War, never mentioning that Black Lives Matter or infanticide or
Antifa.
Oh, Antifa, yep.
Might be a problem. But my point kind of is, irregardless of what you think about election integrity, if, and this number keeps growing, and in the conflict between the media and the internet is winning. And they're winning on this issue. If basically over half your people think there's a problem with election integrity, irregardless of what you think, you ought to be dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think there should be a commission from the state that takes our election people that know the elections, that work with the elections, and they ought to bring the people that are challenging the elections, they ought to get them together and work together to figure out, okay, you say this is good, you say there's a problem here, let's look at it and see how we figure, how we count. Every person should be confident their vote counts, and other votes that shouldn't be there don't count.
Yeah. So
And
what?
one other thing, irregardless of that proposition, we audit banks because we think our money's important. We audit organizations because we think our shares are important and our customers are important. We should set up an audit system for the elections, to audit elections, and I'm thinking somewhere around 3 to 5 counties that are gonna be audited, and I'm not talking about just counting the counts. I'm talking about a full audit, and we ought to set that up irregardless.
Well, this is what happened during the pandemic. Is every governor in this country, in their state, because there was a pandemic going on, could write an emergency order to conduct their elections however they wanted to. So do I think there was manipulation in the last election? Absolutely. Do I think illegal activity happened? Absolutely. Do I think the Democrat and swing state governors let ballots be collected in fraudulent ways because they could? Absolutely. I don't think that it was one thing that manipulated our election. I think the Democrats threw everything at the wall to see what could stick. Because they could do that and write an emergency order and run their elections however they wanted to, they did mail-in voting. People got 7 or 8 ballots sent to their home and they just had to send it back in. They got rid of voter ID in some states, and some they let the unions go collect all the ballots, take them home at night and go turn them in to the auditors once a week. They were collecting ballots in Walmart parking lots and putting them into car trunks to transport them back and forth with no legal authority adding any accountability to the fact that they were still secure ballots that were intended to be cast the way that the voters wanted them to be. So we know that happened because of the pandemic, and I've said for months now, I think it's the only reason we're still talking about COVID, is because for this next election cycle, they want to be able to do the same thing. They want to be able to write an emergency order and run their elections however they want to, and we shouldn't let them. Now in South Dakota, we ran our election just like we do all the time. You show up on or before election day, you show voter ID and prove who you are, and you get to vote once in South Dakota. Every state should follow that, and I don't think election laws should be waived because of a crisis that's going on. I think they still have to be trusted, and it's be important for us to make sure that we keep doing. Now, I tried to get a bunch of Republican governors to go together with me and to do election integrity bills this year, and Republicans didn't want to because they didn't think it polled well, and they thought Trump was talking about it too much, and so they didn't want to get in, and that's just, we're going to have to start getting some leaders in this country that have a little bit of grit in their belly, because this watching polls to decide how you feel that day is a train wreck waiting to happen, and that happened. I did the same thing every other governor in this country did. We got on conference calls, and I spoke with researchers and spent hours talking to doctors and medical experts, but I also spent a lot of time with constitutional attorneys knowing what I could do as governor and what I couldn't do as far as your rights as people. And that's where those other governors just quit caring. They were scared. They were scared and they didn't know what was going to happen, and so they overstepped their authority and took away people's freedoms. So that's the challenge that we have when it comes to our elections too. And we're going to make sure that we keep carrying that message. But every state did different things and manipulated their system because they could. They were allowed to. Yes?
I'll bring it back to the local level.
Sure.
Gene Cox.
Yep.
I'll throw Benj under the bus, because him and I were talking about it last week. And kind of pull Scott in a little bit on the county level. The short version is, what can we do as a small town to get a program called Spruce Up South Dakota to come back?
What year was that done? That was back in Janklo's time, wasn't it?
That was an idea.
Tore down a bunch of old buildings and,
Houses.
yeah.
And initially he sent in prisoners and machinery, and that evolved into, I think, contractors.
I haven't done all of my homework as we've talked about.
Yeah.
That was kind of a one-time shot. There's another former mayor sitting over here, I don't know if Kyle was involved in that. Kyle talks a lot about it. But that was like a one-time shot, and it gave small towns like Mobridge and other small towns the opportunity to get a huge, giant building.
Right.
I know there's funding out there now, but let's start running into is there asbestos, what do we do with afterwards? And we've got some projects that'll have to go to bids. I'm not gonna say any numbers on quotes.
Mm-hmm.
But you gotta start looking, in the program eye, you gotta start looking at how you're gonna get that money back out of it. And it's in my brain, it's almost like a real estate deal, and you'll never get your demolition costs back out of it.
Have you done a workforce study or work housing study, a housing study in your community to know what you need? Because getting that done will help us a long ways towards looking at clearing lots and getting infrastructure in place with some of these dollars so that you can redevelop those lots then in the future. So maybe if you haven't done one in the last 2 years, I would encourage you to do, and their planning districts will pay for this study, but that tells you what kind of homes you need to accommodate your community and to grow and the businesses that are here.
Correct.
And then we can start using those lots and that data to back up what's required from us and how to use these federal dollars appropriately.
See, I was just visiting with South Dakota, and that's when you called things, and you got to go to this back, because I was on the phone with South Dakota Housing, and that was kind of what I had gotten back with, because I told the lady kind of what the demo cost was gonna be, and she said, you're gonna start running that risk of with your demo cost in the funding.
Mm-hmm.
Now the cost of your house is
Right.
here, and your appraisal's gonna come in here. I just visited, Ted Dickey and NECOG over in Aberdeen, and there's some stuff through your governor, the governor's economic development office.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of stuff. And somehow I got to talking to Benj after that, and it just clicked, for a municipality. And granted, it's a very expensive process, but it's a very simple process. There's X dollars, each municipality, get the stuff down and get it done and get it out.
Well, and that's why when I brought my budget and I put the 200 million into housing that's why I wrote it the way I wanted it, was because it was grants to small towns. The way it ended up and the way the legislature passed it, you guys will be lucky if you see any of that dollars, because it's loans now, and now you have to repay them, and that's going to add costs to your housing. And then we sent it over to the housing authority, which the legislature has no authority over. It's a separate entity, and that is also kind of crippled by federal government regulations because it's a housing authority. Housing authorities typically throughout the country do not have a lot of integrity. South Dakota has a well-run one, but it's separate from the legislature, it's separate from state government. It's an entity that runs federal dollars through, and they're also hampered by income limits. So now the income limits are so low that you're gonna build a lot, demo the house, build the infrastructure, come back maybe a year or two later, put a house in there, and then you're going to have to go and make sure that the people living in that house make less than $115,000 a year. If they make more than that, all that money you spent the years prior has to be paid back to the federal government. So that's what we're trying to figure out, how to fix, it's important that we address housing. I gotta try to figure out how I make that program actually work so any dollars get to come to Mobridge at all. Because it's now been moved over to the authority. And that's one of those bills that, you know, I started this session with recognizing the unprecedented amount of money that we had, and that I had wanted to go into session with as much agreed on with the legislature as possible. So we had telephone town halls. I went to 10 different communities with legislators and had coffee and lunch with them, what their priorities were. Literally everything that was in my budget this year was there because a legislator told me they wanted it funded. And so that budget was what the legislature told me they wanted. But the housing program, when I said we should do this housing, it was for the infrastructure on those lots and cleaning them up. And it was a grant to the community, so that was not gonna cost you anything, you'd have to pay it back. Then that could make that house affordable so that people in your community could actually build a house and live there and still have a good quality of life. It's very different now, and I'm gonna have to try to figure out how to fix it. I'm gonna have to start a group that, I don't know how, because I don't have a lot of authority over federal government regulations, but it's, that's the challenge we had this year, was that I bet I had 36 different legislators request housing assistance and in the form of grants, and then all of a sudden that became contentious because all of a sudden people said, well, this governor wants to give grants, she doesn't want to make it loans. Well, I just wanted every town to qualify. I don't want all the money to go to Sioux Falls and Rapid City. I just don't.
This governor would love to stand here and visit with you folks, because she is a small town girl and this is her environment, she loves it. But she needs to be wheels up in about another 10 to 12 minutes. So let's take one more question, and then Mr. Weisbeck, if you and your students would gather up front as soon as she's done, we want to get a.
Well, the only reason we're tight on time, and I apologize for being late as well because of the fog, but is we have our only rabbi in the state of South Dakota from Sioux Falls is in Pier waiting for me. We are going to do an executive order today saying that we are not going to take investments in the state from those who are anti-Israel. And so he is in Pier. You know, we've seen anti-Semitic things burst up in all other states, and it's been tragic to watch what's happened with the targeting of specific races and groups. And the rabbi is so excited for today. If I don't show up for that too, he'll be disappointed in me, and I don't want that because we finally got a rabbi in South Dakota. We don't want to lose him. So, yes, sir.
Governor, thanks for coming and thanks for what you do for us. Quick question about the second round of COVID money, the American Rescue Plan, I believe is what it is. I would assume that the state receives some of those funds as well as individual counties, and I think even Sioux Falls and Rapid City got direct payments. Yet it's really difficult for us to access those funds because it's all tied to loss during COVID. How did the state, or was the state able to manage some way to access those funds, and what recommendations would you possibly have at the county level?
Well, there's dollars that came to the state that's completely separate from what came to a county or what went to a city. And then our tribes got special, separate dollars as well. I can't help you go advocate for dollars that were supposed to come directly to you. And that's what they did the second time around that nobody really talks about. This group of federal funding, they allocated it according to unemployment rates and which communities got hit the hardest because of the pandemic, and which ones do you think got hit the hardest. This was done under Biden's administration, so obviously he rewarded all of his Democrat states and cities for their shutdowns and for their bad numbers, and gave them more money because of it. So they got a lot more money per population than the state of South Dakota did, which, we still made the right decisions. But
the county did receive a check. It's just accessing it because it's all tied to losses, which, as we addressed earlier, we didn't shut down. It's really hard to show a loss.
Right.
And actually, a lot of the cities were even up in sales tax revenues and things like that.
Well, so let me find out why you're not able to access it, because my belief is if you got that check, if you have monies allocated to you already, you should have it and be able to utilize it.
down, it's just tied to a law, you have to show a loss.
So you aren't able to prove any kind of a loss.
Not really.
But there still should be a minimum that comes to you, even if some of that you don't get to keep because your loss wasn't that much. Let us work with you. We'll work with you on it. Because we've got some people that just, in our budget of finance and management, that make this their baby. They understand it very well. All right. Anything else? Well, thank you so much for being patient. Yes, sir.
I have a comment. Maybe it doesn't seem as important as some of the stuff, but it seems like when they repave the roads around here, I'm no engineer, but they're either not grading them down enough or there's something they need to do to make the roads better, but it seems like a big waste when they repave a road and a year or two later they're already cracked up and round.
So give me a highway.
When they're redoing the road, and it's like, well, it'll be nice for a couple days or a couple of years.
Okay. Give me a highway so I can point to it with my secretary.
Drive to McLaughlin.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. It's kind of funny. My secretary of transportation too is probably pretty tired of me. Benj, I called him when we had bad weather on Wednesday afternoon, and I was going south out of Pier down to Vivian, and the roads were awful. I mean, it had probably 6 inches of slush on it, and it was just terrible. And I called up Rachel and I said, call Joel, who's the secretary of and tell him somebody's going to die out here. This is awful. We got to get the plows out here. And she called back and she goes, well, he said to tell you that road is closed. Because I'm like, oh, okay, well, only the governor would be out driving around on a closed road that was supposed to be. But I'll find out. Yeah, I agree with you. I feel the same way too. And they're going to say some things about, the whole bed of the highway and our heavy equipment that we carry on it and stuff breaks it up that much faster, and they're not in the budget to redo the entire, but I'll find out for sure specifically. I feel that same way too.
Well, Governor and Lieutenant Governor, thank you for remembering where rural South Dakota is, for being